Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here. In this video we're talking about PlayStation 2, Nintendo Switch, PalmOS and more. Let's get started. Alright, we'll kick things off here talking about a brand new emulator, PumpkinOS. PumpkinOS is a re-implementation of PalmOS. It does not require a PalmOS ROM and it can run the M68K PalmOS applications. Now at this point in time, PumpkinOS is so new that there's not even a wiki for it. It was just released 3 days ago. If you are curious about it and wanted to learn more, I'll drop a link to this website in the description below and I do recommend checking it out. On top of that, I'll drop a link to the GitHub page for PumpkinOS in the description below. PumpkinOS is free and open source. Next up, we're talking about PlayStation 2 emulation with PCSX2. And PCSX2 has been on fire lately with a whole bunch of updates. At the time of filming, the latest version is 4095. I'll drop a link to this page in the description below. There's a bunch of GameDB updates including Rough Trigger, Bakugan Battle Brawlers, and also Crazy Taxi. And there might be a performance update. If you are curious about the possible performance improvements, I'll drop a link to the GitHub site in the description below and you can check it out for yourself. At a high level here, this change optimized readback performance for some cases, significantly increases performance in some cases. As for the games that were tested out, SOCOM 2 went from 37 frames per second to 180 frames per second. Gundam Battle Assault 3 went from 44 frames per second to 200 frames per second. Red Faction 2 went from 350 frames per second to a whopping 820 frames per second. And Armored Core 3 went from 47 frames per second to 117 frames per second. It's worth pointing out that this performance improvement will only apply in certain cases. It's not going to work for every single game. For example, this person says, is it going to work for GT3 and GT4? And the developer says you can try it, but they're not expecting them to change too much since they only do one readback. So this will be a game-by-game basis. Next up here, we're still talking about PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1 and also PlayStation 3 and also BIOS files. There appears to be a brand new way to pick up PS1 and PS2 BIOS files. So at a high level here, someone has written a program to extract PS1 and PS2 BIOS files right from PS3 firmware. Official PS3 firmware that can be picked up right from Sony's website, 100% free. You do need to install RPCS3 in order to do this, but at the same time here it seems pretty simple. If you wanted a tutorial, Easy on the Eyes has one, and I'll drop a link to this video in the description below. Feel free to check it out. And as far as I know, these BIOS files do work with DuckStation, AetherSX2, and PCSX2. Very interesting. And speaking about utilities, next up we're talking about something extremely interesting. ChatGPT, but with Mario. MarioGPT, an open-ended text-to-level generation. If you are interested in this one, I'll drop a link to the GitHub in the description below. It is free, it is open source. Now, MarioGPT isn't for the faint of heart. You will need Python on your computer and you'll need to know how to use it in order to use MarioGPT. At this point in time, there are some future plans, training code from paper, open-ended level generation code, and different generation methods. While MarioGPT might not be the most practical thing or easiest thing to use out there, considering it does output to text file and you will need a Mario ROM editor, at the same time here, this is exciting and I'm really curious to see where this goes. And speaking about games, next up we're talking about custom Robo for the Gamecube. There is a very interesting utility that was just released, a model swapping utility. It will allow you to model swap pretty much any single NPC in game, and if you wanted to check it out, I'll drop a link to it in the description below. Next up, this is a pretty quick one. We're talking about GarlicOS for the Anbernic 35XX. GarlicOS version 1.0.7 just released, and if you're a fan of RetroArch, some of these controls might be pretty familiar for you. If you're using GarlicOS, you might want to pick up the latest version here. There are some key combinations that might make your life easier. Next up, we're talking about Nintendo Switch emulation on PC with Yuzu, and Yuzu's got a couple of updates. Mainline 1341 just released, and it fixes an audio noise generated in some games like Metroid Prime Remastered and Fire Emblem Engage. And the paid testing early access version of Yuzu, 3402 just released. And this one improves frame latency. Last up here, we're talking about a very interesting Linux distribution, and if you're into pen testing, well, you might be a fan of ParrotOS Security Edition. It's got a brand new update here up to 5.2. It's still using the Linux Core 6.0, which is an interesting choice. But at the same time here, if you're using this on the Raspberry Pi, there are some performance improvements. I'll leave a link to this in the description below in the event that you did want to check it out. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. We talked about a bunch today. Let me know your thoughts about absolutely any of it in the comments below. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos, don't tempt fate, save your state.